Welcome to On the Chain. This is Jeff here with co-host Chip on a special night. We have a very, very exciting guest here with us tonight. Just want to do a quick intro. This is Congressman Byron Donalds, and the congressman is from the West Coast from here. So he's over in Naples, Florida, serving the district out there. Really interesting story coming down here from Brooklyn, New York. Doing amazing things, held Chair Gensler to task. We're super excited to bring the congressman in. A lot to talk about. Graduate of Florida State. So there's a big congratulations to the congressman for that, because they had a big victory over the weekend. So I think let's bring. Do you want to bring the congressman in now or after the?
Let's go ahead. Let's do the throw.
Into it. Let's do the throw. We'll bring the congressman in. I'm fired up to have him here with us tonight. So Chip, if you're ready, let's kick this.
Welcome to On the Chain.
And without further ado, Jeff, let's go ahead and get this thing going. Rep Byron Donalds, how are you doing? Welcome to On the Chain. Great to have you with us tonight.
Hey, it's good to be with you guys. Yeah, I'm excited. You know, my Seminoles looked good last night against LSU, and actually, my oldest son, he plays for Holy Cross. They won big too, so it was a good weekend, good football weekend.
That's awesome.
Both my daughters attend there. My youngest is there now, and FSU. So all really good stuff. So I think what we'll open up the show with is I want to play a short little video. It's a short little video of you questioning Chair Gary Gensler of the SEC. I want to ask you a couple questions about it. Let's take a quick look at this.
I think it might have came up. You were Hillary Clinton's CFO in the campaign, right?
It's part of my history.
Were you? Yes or no?
In 2016.
Did you facilitate the payment for the Steele dossier since you were CFO of the Hillary Clinton campaign?
Sir.
Yes or no?
Sir.
Yes or no?
That was not.
You're under oath, Chairman Gensler. Yes or no?
I know. I was not something I was aware of.
I yield back the rest of my time. Thank you.
So it was something he wasn't aware of. So Congressman Donalds, was a line of questioning that was not expected, because there was a lot of great stuff that day. It was towards the end of the hearing. What was your thought on his answer there?
Well, first, my thought is that, yeah, he knew he paid for it. He knows that he did. He knows he can't admit that he did. And look, at that high up in the Hillary Clinton campaign, you knew it was phony information that they put into the intelligence community. Now, after the Durham reports come out, that's exactly what occurred. They were laundering phony information into the intelligence community. And I think the real danger behind what Gary Gensler essentially wrote the check for and Hillary Clinton orchestrated was this I don't want to say it. This was the start of the weaponization of the federal agencies. And you could really clearly point to this time period. Hillary at the time thought she was a possibility she could lose. She ended up losing. And she was trying to do anything she could to get a grip on power and to hold on to power. And because Donald Trump came along and snuffed that out, they decided to turn the agencies, not just against him, but it's just also a continuation of what they were doing to the Tea Party movement back in 2014. And that periodically the federal agencies have been engaged with when there are Americans who don't play ball with the status quo.
And it's even a little more troublesome that these are unelected bureaucrats. At least through our election process, we can remove somebody. But here's an unelected bureaucrat sitting there making big decision that has had rippling effect, on our country. But it seems like, Chair Gensler isn't a stranger to having issues and doing the wrong thing and being on the wrong side of history. So we saw that, coming out, perfectly in regard to funding the dossier and trying to really, help impede or stop, Trump's first run. But now we also see Chair Gensler on the wrong side of history when it comes to digital assets, cryptocurrency, and he's lost major case after major case. The big one that we talk a lot about has been with the company Ripple and in relation to a digital asset, XRP, which has now been really deemed through, the court as a non-security, but he's finding himself on the wrong side of history. If you could reflect a little bit on that and kind of taking from where you were at that moment, that was almost like the beginning, of his downfall, it seems like, but he's still sitting there. He's an unelected bureaucrat having a negative impact on us.
Well, I mean, look, when the Ripple lawsuit actually finally came down, we, on the Financial Services Committee, we thought that the court would do something like similar to what they actually did. But that being said, the real issue at the SEC, and to be clear, it's not just the SEC, but it's probably the most vocal, is the fact that Chairman Gensler is taking authority Congress never gave him. And you got to understand, all these agencies, their powers are built upon a legal framework that Congress has passed at some point in time throughout American history. But we've never given the SEC any ability to regulate blockchain, to regulate digital assets, whatever format might be, stable coin, cryptos, whatever. We've never given that authority because Congress still has not weighed in on what any of the stuff even is, one, or two, what's the regulatory framework going to look like. If it were just up to me, I would never put the SEC anywhere near digital assets because the SEC's regulatory purview is very specific to publicly traded entities, and they have a hard enough time getting that right most of the time. So why give them an entirely new financial tool when they can't seem to even get their initial job correct most of the time?
Yeah, another part of that interview too that we did show, but you also pressed him on the whole, what were they thinking in 1933 and 1934 about climate disclosure, right? So this was another big dust up, another overreach about climate disclosures. And where is this coming from? I know there's a driven narrative, but where is that coming from, especially not even putting it out for at least 90 days to get some public opinion on it?
Well, again, this is some of the real issues we're having with all the federal agencies, but I'll keep it focused on the SEC and Gary Gensler. Congress has not stipulated or spoken about climate change or even climate disclosures. The most we've done, quote unquote, is that you have some renewable tax credits that exist in the tax code. With what Joe Biden did with the tax credits, it's roughly $1 trillion if you listen to Goldman Sachs in tax credits for solar panel and windmill plants, et cetera, development in the United States, electric batteries and things like that. But we've never come out with a climate disclosure piece of legislation that will give the SEC the ability to now try to quantify or make companies quantify a climate disclosure. The most destructive of them are these scope 3 disclosures, because it's basically like, if you're a company with human beings and you happen to do business with anybody on the planet, is there a carbon footprint to that? And it's really just insane at this point, because then you could really go down the line of saying your scope 3 disclosure is anything you come into contact with. I mean, that's just patently absurd. The purpose of financial disclosures, is to give investors credible and material information with respect to their ability to invest in public companies. That is the whole purpose of disclosures. And the reason why I questioned them about the 33 and 34 Securities Act is because nothing in there actually gives the SEC the ability to do what Gary Gensler thinks that it should do. But like I said, this is something that we're seeing throughout the federal agencies. And let me add this point, because what a lot of the agencies like to do now, where you're really seeing the full weight of the bureaucratic state, is they will come out with a paper or an opinion, or they will start the process on rulemaking. And the entire purpose is to not actually ever really see it come to fruition, but it's to get companies to jump through that hoop ahead of time so that they would have the ability to avoid the investigative arm of these agencies, because the investigations are time consuming, they're very costly, and you don't want to have to deal with one of these extended examinations. So what do you do if you're a publicly traded company? You see Gary Gensler put up a potential proposal, man, let's just get in compliance so we don't have to deal with this. And so they're doing it by threat of potential investigation as opposed to an act of Congress. And that stuff has got to stop.
That's really great. So, it amazes me. It seems like, in Chip and I always talk about this, when your enemy's in the process of destroying themselves, you kind of let them do it. And it seems like everything that they're doing, up to this point, on that side, and just focused in on what we've seen with the previous chair of the Financial Services Committee with Maxine Waters, and the fact that they wouldn't bring any crypto policy to discussion. There weren't a lot, but we had the Token Taxonomy Act, over a number of years. This year we see a lot, and it's also interesting that the few people that Congress, those specific representatives, Maxine Waters, Gary Gensler, and a few others met with, one of the big names was Sam Bankman-Fried. And we kind of know what happened to FTX, and these were in the months kind of leading up to the collapse of FTX. How did that resonate in Congress? How did you see that, and how has that had any kind of negative or kind of eye-opening, moment on Capitol Hill?
Well, first thing I'll tell you is that the first eye-opening thing is that even though Sam Bankman-Fried was giving most of his money to Democrats, like the vast majority went to Democrats. The Democrats, who are the ones who typically are looking for all kind of ways to regulate behavior, they went suddenly quiet on this. And the reason why is because it would expose the fact that they were deep in bed with him and trying to, whatever the regulatory push he was looking for, that's what they were going to do, simply because he was donating so much money. So they went stone quiet on this. And I think that on Capitol Hill, the reaction from, my side of the aisle was, to the press, hey, you guys are always talking about corporate corruption and corporate greed and all that. Well, here's this guy who's been given to the Dems almost unilaterally. And the press will come back to us and say, oh, but he gave to some Republicans too. And then you just look at them like, you guys got to be kidding me. Like, you're not even serious about this stuff. I think with FTX in particular, it's pretty clear to me that this is much more about accounting fraud than anything to do with digital assets. And I think that some people on the left were trying to say, well, this is why we have to have strong regulation about crypto and tokens and stable coins and all this other stuff. And, my view was, no. This is actually some of the things that Sarbanes-Oxley, although I think it's one of the worst pieces of legislation, not the worst, but one of the worst. It's one of the things that Sarbox actually makes it illegal to do. He did it anyway. And frankly, he did it with impunity and nobody knew anything until his firm blew up. And so I think it's one of the things we have to really get to and understand is that, and I'm gonna just talk straight with you. The Democrats on Capitol Hill are not interested in making sure that the regulatory system and financial markets is sound. What they're much more interested in my view, looking at the history of the policies that they have support, is to frankly enrich those that they find favor with and allow those firms to propagate and flourish. And if you're not playing the game that they're playing, you don't have room to be on the playing field, frankly. I mean, it's a slightly off of digital assets, but look at community banking overall in the United States. We were told with not Sarbanes-Oxley, with Dodd-Frank, we were told that too big to fail would never happen again. Well, I know that the big banks donate to Democrats a lot. And the other thing I know is the big banks have gotten massively bigger. It's your small community banks that have gone away because they can't keep up with the regulatory burden. And my fear in digital assets is that if they have the ability to write similar legislation and a regulatory framework, it'll be your small players in the digital asset space, people trying to build wealth, people trying to create, innovate, etc. They'll be the ones who will be wiped out and destroyed by the regulatory track record of the Democrats.
It's a good point. I mean, I was going to bring that up because Dodd-Frank came out of the 2008 meltdown, and that was one of the things, like, we're not going to do these bailouts anymore, except for SVB. And the funny thing is that when SVB failed, it was amazing to see who banked there, right? Not only were some of the biggest VCs, but a lot of people in a certain blue party of Congress also had accounts there. And it's like, that was, it wasn't the too big to fail. It was like, oh, it was a bank run, and then you had some other failures as well. But again, what's the point of passing legislature if we're not gonna actually get to that? I wanted to ask you about a big topic that's been coming up often is this whole idea of BRICS, right? You have the BRICS nation attempting to do the de-dollarization, right? And they met recently, and the buzz on the street was they were going to come up with a digital asset, or they're going to have their own currency or something at this point. And it turns out all that ended up being was let's just transact their own currency. What is your thought around the whole BRICS idea? This sort of anti U.S. dollar. I mean, that they're on, and what's the appetite and what's going on as far as Congress? What's the pulse in Congress?
Well, look, I think this whole thing with the BRICS countries is, frankly, it's a wake-up call for us as a country. We have had the luxury in the United States of being the dominant economic power, which means that a lot of people get to use our currency. And because we are the dominant player in just about every financial transaction in the world, and for a large part of the last 100 years, we were the only player in terms of transactions on the global stage. Other countries had to deal with us and our dollar and our financial way of doing business. And I think by and large, this has been a great thing for the world in general, not just because of America per se, but what it did is it made our national economy really a global economy. More people have come out of poverty in the world in the last 100 years than at any other time in the history of man on the face of the earth. So writ large, the dollar's dominance as reserve currency, our economic dominance has been a great thing for the world. The problem comes in when we here at home are just reckless with our spending and reckless with the actual value of our dollar. And there's a real arrogance from policymakers in Washington, just thinking that we can just spend whatever and do whatever, and there's no consequences. Because the history of economics is very clear. You debase your currency too much, then you become a bad credit risk. You become a bad credit risk. Other countries are going to say, well, then why am I holding on to all these dollars if they're just going to keep debasing them, or whatever the currency is? I'm going to go do something else. And I think what the BRICS nations what they're trying to do, in some respects, I do understand. Because if I was one of these countries, I'd be looking at the United States saying, these guys are not serious. They're on a pathway financially where their dollar ain't even going to be worth the good faith and credit that's written on the note. Because now we have two credit agencies that have downgraded us. First S&P, now Fitch Ratings has downgraded us, Fitch. And so we have a real come to Jesus moment, I think, in the United States. Now, do I think it's solvable? Oh, 100% I do, because we have such a dominant purchasing power through, frankly, the American people. It's not the government, but the American people's willingness to buy products gives us an enormous purchasing ability that I think other countries of the world are going to have to process and really think through. But if the value of our dollar continues to just be exploited so we can have unchecked government spending, we're going to lose that stronghold. And it's going to be much more disastrous than some other floating currency out there that competes on the global stage. I think what people in America need to understand is that that's going to make interest rates significantly higher in our country. It's going to actually whittle away even further what our dollar can buy and how far it goes for your average American family. And it's gonna create a whole nother era of economic pain that our country really hasn't had to deal with, frankly, in about 100 years.
Yeah, so here we are. We're sitting on this precipice, and we have another big election coming up in 24.
Yep.
The country is facing a lot of hurdles right now. There's a lot of positive things after 24 if things go the right way. We see the markets with crypto, financial markets, all these great things, but we also we're in this big hole right now. Border security being one of them. Obviously, you've made some statements, in regards to the Biden administration as being one of the most corrupt ever, and also in relation to maybe the president himself is compromised. Do you think that is having an impact on decisions that we're seeing unfold right now. Maybe kind of taking a back seat and not, we don't see the administration being outspoken at all in relation to BRICS, not doing anything on border security. And then the whole thing with the cryptocurrency and letting Chair Gensler kind of run rampant and do what
I
he wants
do.
to do.
Yeah, I do. And I think, in terms of my view of the administration, I think the corruption is twofold. I think the president personally is compromised. I mean, look, you can't take in that kind of money into your family and not have to pay that bill back. I'm sorry. There is no free lunch ever, nowhere in the history of the world. You ain't taking in that kind of money to the tune now $30, $40 million for, you know, the favor of Hunter Biden. Let's just call it that for now. And there's no payback at all. I just think that's silly, especially considering the fact that Hunter Biden has facilitated a lot of transactions and been a part of a lot of transactions in a lot of parts of the world. So if you take the Green New Deal policy, I know people who are on the left side of our politics in America who are, heartfelt, they have a heartfelt concern for climate and for our environment. And I don't want to speak anything against that per se, but the solutions being brought to us are essentially to acquire all of our material from the Chinese, because the Chinese are the ones that dominate the mineral rights around the globe. So we're going to acquire the material from our primary adversary on the world stage. That's a massive transfer of wealth, and nobody bats an eye to that whatsoever, especially when you combine the fact that the Chinese care little about environmental standards. And when I say little, that means they don't care. They're just going to strip mine the earth regardless of what the environment is going to look like. And nobody that's sipping lattes in San Francisco or in Manhattan is even batting an eye thinking about what the Chinese are actually doing to the planet. So that's number one. Number two, you do have a situation where you have elements of this government, the staff members in the White House, staff members in these various agencies, they want an open border. They don't mind just massively spending money. I think you have to understand, and I think a lot of it's important for people to remember, that it is modern monetary theory, which many Democrats on Capitol Hill and the staff of Democrats on Capitol Hill subscribe to. They think it is okay to just constantly spend money as long as the economy keeps up in size. But that is going to just create more bubbles, which are going to hurt more people. So if the choice is for them to achieve their political goals or look at the actual economic structures of the country and do what's best for the country, they're going to achieve their political goals. And it's actually very destructive. And the only reason why I could say that is because I see this in every action of the administration. Open borders, how they choose to spend money, even when we were doing debt ceiling negotiations, what Shalonda Young and the White House are coming back in terms of what were the non-starters in negotiation. We could talk about the fact that, yes, the agencies are spying on the American people. Yes, the FBI has admitted that they spied on 280,000 Americans, that there have been FISA violations of the Patriot Act. I mean, we can go on and on and on. You have the social media companies with Twitter, Facebook, Google, where the FBI and other elements of our government were actively talking to the social media companies to suppress speech in the United States. And then the thing you cannot look away from is, even with the press as it exists, there are so many deep ties with people who've been in Washington, people who've been in these agencies for a very long time. Is there coercion about what gets printed and what gets covered? I 100% believe that. And I wouldn't have said that before I got to Congress, but now being in Congress, you see how deep these ties go. And so I think when you talk about economic issues like the BRICS nations, or you talk about regulatory reform, real regulatory reform in the financial system writ large, or even if you want to be specific to digital assets, which what I believe is there should just be a regulatory sandbox for digital assets. And the agencies can basically, for descriptive purposes, the agencies can observe the industry, comment on the rules that the industry is building for a regulatory framework, but the industry actually runs the regulatory framework. That way you have a nimble industry that can be responsive to the changes in technology, changes in the market. But you have the various agencies paying attention and watching mindfully, so that you have a strong industry overall. But you got to understand, there's no talent pool at the CFTC or the SEC that knows more about digital assets than the people in the market actually doing the business every single day. There is no talent in these agencies that knows what they're talking about. So that's why I say, to your question, am I concerned that that this election in 24 has massive stakes for the country? I 100% think it does. I do believe that a lot of the fiscal health of the nation, I do believe, is on the line. And it's not just about spending money. It is the regulatory burden on our industries, especially one that's a fledgling industry like digital assets.
Yeah, well said there. And I'm just out of curiosity, what is your thought on the Federal Reserve? So central banking, even around the world, has been created a lot of, I guess, the whole idea of a system built on debt, the fact that it's not a real sovereign currency, it's a third-party entity, it's never been audited, over 100 years, never been audited. And the founders and framers of the United States originally didn't have this whole concept or even wanting to have some kind of a central banking type of thing. We had Andrew Jackson back in the 1930s who vetoed the charter after 20 years and basically got rid of it. But somehow they sort of inked their way back into the system. And I think largely the Federal Reserve, their two tenants, they failed miserably on, right? Keeping inflation under control. And the second part of that too, which is jobs. Jobs are being lost like ridiculously, and inflation's going up. So what is your thought on that? I'm just curious on what the appetite in Congress is too. Would there ever be an audit of the Federal Reserve? I mean, would there ever be a call to go back to more of a gold-backed sort of a currency? Because I do know that this is happening in Texas, of gold-backed currency. I do know there's just a bill in the House at this moment ready. It's on the sidelines, but ready to go to talk about a gold-backed type of a currency. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, specific to the Fed, I think a couple of things need to happen there. One, I think the whole the safety and soundness aspect of the Fed, but then monitoring the banking system, I think that needs to be pulled away from the Fed. That's number one. I think safety and soundness, the regulatory oversight, there are ways to do that without having the Federal Reserve being able to do that. So I think the Fed needs to be pulled out of that. Number two, with respect to their mandates, I think that they should have one mandate of price stability. That is it. The Fed shouldn't be monitoring employment and all this other stuff, because essentially what we've done through Congress and through past presidents is that we've given so much over of the levers of our economy over to unelected bureaucrats or an unelected board, as opposed to Congress actually being able to have that say. And I think if Congress was really in charge of the levers of, if you want to say interest rates or whatever the case might be, and Congress was the one doing that, our elections actually would be a lot better, because there would be instant repercussions for terrible policymaking by Congress. And you would actually see a reversal, of course, of terrible policymaking by Congress, because the impacts would be immediate and nobody would want to sit around for 2 years watching that disaster unfold. It's easy to put it off on the Fed, which is why I think a lot of members of Congress have no problem with the Fed, because it's easy to just blame Jay Powell or blame Ben Bernanke or blame Alan Greenspan, as opposed to taking responsibility for the things that you do. I think an audit of the Fed, yep, sign me up for that. Do I think that gets through Congress? I'm just not sure. And the only reason I say that is because we have a lot of people that have been in Congress for a long time, especially in the Senate. And what happens on Capitol Hill is people don't like breaking old habits. This sounds, like weird to say it, but the reality is that Congress is a creature of habit, like anything else. Like going to somebody's house and start moving the remote control around and moving where they store their beer, they're going to be pissed. Congress is no different. And so you got to have to get a turnover of a lot of members, I think, before you start seeing audits of that. I think to the backing of our currency, definitely open to gold or some other precious metal. But then I'm also, I've been reading about it, and I've not put my mind on any one way yet. But I do believe that in the United States, we can have competing currencies, which is why I think cryptocurrencies, I think this is one of the innate real values for the country long term is that if you have other currencies that can be transacted and whatever, and they're allowed by law in the United States and so on and so forth, in a lot of respects, that's a check on value for the American people. That doesn't happen when you go to the store. It happens because you talk to your buddy who had, 1,000 Satoshis or whatever the transaction is to get one Bitcoin or whatever it is at that point. And they can sit there and say, well, look, man, here's what my Bitcoin is worth. Hey, your dollar ain't worth that. And that helps people make real economic decisions in their lives, but also in their politics. And I think that's a critical thing for our country going forward.
That's a really great statement. I'm glad, we kind of brought that back in, looking at the benefit of crypto as we start moving forward. And I know we're kind of at a time limit. We've been on for 30 minutes already. But I have a final question on this one. And
Sure, absolutely.
and it has to do with central bank digital currencies, the digital dollar, digital euro, digital rupee, the digital yuan. It seems like there's a lot of traction on the red team, as we refer to the GOP, and the blue team, kind of in favor of central bank digital currencies and programmable money, and the red team not so much. Where do you think things fall right now? We see some voices speaking out against. I know Ron DeSantis spoken out against, Warren Davidson has spoken out against, but is Governor, Congress, congressional representative, where do you see Congress on this, on both sides of the aisle? How does this unfolding right now?
I think a lot of the Democrats are for it. The Democrats, I believe, that are the holdouts are actually going to be the Black Democrats, because they represent a lot of people who don't want the United States government in their business. Let's just call it what it is. And I got a lot of people. I think the reason why a lot of Republicans are opposed to it is because our voters, frankly, do not trust these agencies and don't want them in our business when it comes to just making your normal transactions. There was a proposal in one of the reconciliation bills that Nancy Pelosi brought in the last Congress, and what it called for was for the Treasury Department to be able to look into your bank account if you transacted more than $600 in aggregate over a year, which was basically everybody's bank account, right?
Yeah.
And when the reason why that provision didn't come law, it wasn't because of Republicans, it's because you had independents and Democrats saying, absolutely not, get your hands out of my pocket. You don't get to look into my bank accounts. The beauty of our dollar, and really the beauty of the American financial system, has been that up until very recently, there has never been a desire to look at how you spend your money. It's like, Chip Jeff, if I decided to buy your headphones from this interview, nobody would know unless I told them, or you told them that I bought the headphones. That's a very simple thing, but it's a powerful thing, because it is the very basis of a trust system in transactions. I do not trust these agencies to maintain trust. I simply don't. So especially considering that the technology is there, there's no real reason why we need a centrally backed currency, a digital currency, excuse me. I don't really see the need for that. If it ever came to fruition, I say that the penalties have to be so severe, like so severe. I'm talking like 15 years in jail, $10 million fine per occurrence of somebody walking in the back door and looking at accounts. But I'm very concerned about that. I think there's a lot of voters that just are not there for this, especially a lot of elderly voters. Like, they're still getting caught up to speed on Apple Pay and Samsung Pay. I don't think they're there for digital backed currencies. And so this is something that's going to evolve over time. But at the end of the day, it's about trust. And if people have a blatant distrust for the Treasury Department, the OCC, the SEC, the CFTC, you can go down the list. Why would you allow them to be the only basis for what's in your digital wallet? I am not a fan of that. And I will add, it gives them a direct access to manipulate value if you're having to find ways to monetize the debt structure of the United States into the future. It's way more invasive than anything the Fed can do right now. I'm
That's
just
well
not
said.
supportive of it.
Just a little more elaboration to that one, sorry. But in terms of, so you have the older population that have to understand it. What about the older representatives in both the House and Senate that are still they're clueless over what a Facebook is or a Twitter? Maybe they understand a little bit more now, but they're still there. We have a president tripping upstairs. Unfortunately, we have McConnell that's
Right.
spacing out, and regardless of what people say about their physical aptitude, we know there's issues across the board. But how do we resonate outside of cognitive decline? How do you resonate to the representatives and get them to understand, hey, this is a bad thing or this is a good thing?
Well, I think that's what's happening more in the Financial Services Committee. Members are going to other members. But one of the real dangers of Congress that I've seen, and it doesn't get talked about a lot of members don't talk to each other. You know who does the talking? The staffs. So the staffs are mostly anywhere between 20 and 40 years old. A lot of them between 20 and 30 years old in the House and the Senate. So when you see these senators who, they are having health issues, but they're still voting, how is this possible? Because the staffs told them how to vote. The staffs told them yes or no. This is a serious problem in Washington, D.C., where you have people who are elected to make major decisions. Their staffs are the ones that are making these decisions with very little input from the members, I might add. So it's a very dangerous topic, which is why I think my first goal is to just make sure that whatever roadblocks need to exist to hold it up, let's do that first. And then I think as Congress begins to continue to turn over, and I will say, I think you're going to see a lot of turnover in Congress over the next decade. There's just a lot of members who are very old. And, for whatever the reasons are, they're going to have to leave Congress. And so I think that turnover is going to help in that regard. But look, it's if you ever had to help somebody who's, older figure out that they don't need to print their boarding pass at the airport, they can just use the app. If you've had to do that, just imagine for about 40 members of Congress who probably still print their boarding passes.
Oh,
I mean,
boy.
it's just the thing.
Well, I want to thank you, Congressman Byron Donalds. Thank you for coming on here, especially on Labor Day. I also want to throw your hat in the ring. If it does come up, if there is a choice for vice president, if Donald Trump is looking for a really great candidate, I'm going to throw your name. I want to throw your name because I see you. I follow you everywhere, as does Jeff. And I don't think there'd be any greater representation. So I'd love to, if there's a nomination formal process on the chain,
Bring that out there into the ecosystem.
put that in the ecosystem, throw it out to the universe. I'll tell you what, because you know what's after that. And I also think you'd make an amazing president as well, because I think you have the people's best interest at heart. And I think that's really, really key. So thank you for coming on here. I'll give you the last word before we get out of here.
I mean, look, first of all, I appreciate the nomination. Thanks for getting me in political hot water, I guess. It's all right, man. It's just people. Listen, people are always competing for these posts, man, behind the scenes. It's an interesting thing to watch and haven't seen it. But look, I just want to make sure we do good policy for the country. People may not know I'm a finance guy by trade. I'm securities licensed 766. Had a book of business. I worked in insurance. I worked in commercial banking. On the credit side, I was a credit analyst, credit officer. So, I know enough about certain things to be dangerous, because I did it in my career. And I just want to have sound financial policy. I think if we do that, it'll help to really solve the economic side of our issues going forward. It'll really help go a long way. Couple that with other good policy changes, it'll just be what's best for people. And it gives, people who are underprivileged, or, they don't have the same shot as somebody else. It'll give them more opportunities to succeed in our country. And I think that's what everybody wants in the end.
That's awesome. And, thank you for coming on. Thank you for keeping this the free state of Florida. Thank you for being a representative here. It's not an easy task. Doing what you're doing, but we appreciate it a lot. We're unfortunate on this side because my direct representative is Wasserman Schultz, and that's a tough
Sorry, man.
amount of time to get to get rid of her. But you're doing a phenomenal job. Appreciate having you on here. We'd love to have you back on at a future date. If you're ever on this coast, we'd love to be able to meet up with you in person. We have some great people that are trying to take on Wasserman Schultz right now. So
Of course. Listen, anytime. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Great.
Take care.
Thank you.
Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Right.
Wow, that's amazing. Huh?
Outstanding. That was absolutely outstanding. Really great having him on here. There was a lot of great commentary here. I saw the clock ticking. I'm like, man, there's so
No, I
much
know.
more that we wanted
stay
to
with us
talk
longer. It's
about.
25 minutes. We kind of pushed it a little bit,
Yeah.
Jack. Just a little bit.
Yeah,
So
just a little bit. Just a
yeah,
little
we got
bit.
a lot of good stuff here. Just a lot of good stuff here. Got Robert Deesh says, God bless you. Byron got Oscar saying, bravo, awesome interview. Thank you, Donald. Appreciate that.
Man.
Will you ever accept crypto's donations in the future? There's so many things we could have gotten to, but when you're pressed on time, and also too, what I really liked about the interview is we gave an incredibly thorough answer. It's well thought out. The funny thing was, is before we went live, we're like, hey, we're going to kind of ask. He goes, ask, just let it rip, whatever you want to ask, anything. It was just like,
Yeah,
all
we
right,
did.
all right. He's like, I don't care, anything. Talk to me about anything. It doesn't matter. Let it rip. And just so we'll talk
Except
a little
when
bit
you
about.
nominate him for VP, then he was.
I nominated him for VP, Jeff, because I definitely see that in the future. I really do.
I do too. I think he would be phenomenal.
Sorry to put him on the
Absolutely.
spot like that, but I wanted to say just to
Anything.
put it out there. It's like, great, thanks for getting me in hot water, but that happens. Sometimes you're gonna get that, but no, I just think he's been doing such an amazing job, and I honestly, both of you and I wish he was our rep. I mean, unfortunately, I got another loser over here, winner. I just wherever you want to look at it, but we're probably two of the worst for Florida, right? I mean, we're on the blue coast. I call it the blue coast, where you and I are located down here on the. He's over there in Naples, a little bit more conservative. We got some other people like Mike Morath, who's also on that coast as well. I don't know, Mike, is Byron Donaldson your rep? You get to know. I know he's over there too.
When the initial introduction, I spaced out on which, and it was right in front of me. It's funny. I was
It happens. Though. This is what
District 19, and I couldn't think of it, and it was right there, and I could have read it, but I eyes just didn't.
So weird when you're doing this live. I gotta tell you, so many times where I've just fallen down and saying, this happens sometimes in business too. Like I'm looking right at something, and somebody hits me with something, totally takes me off my, squirrel, and then you're gone on some other thing, and it happens. But yeah, right there, Epidox says, yeah, hell yeah, we'd be a good VP, Mike. Yeah, VP. I could definitely see that, and because I also
it was amazing.
In that case too, you make a remarkable president, so I think that.
Yeah.
But I love the answers too. I think he took everything on head on. It was like the answers were beautiful, and there's only so much time you could do. You look at our keep, and of course we had just the gobs. There was all kinds of stuff I wanted to get to.
Good stuff in there.
Just don't get to it. There's some funny stuff too, like the one thing that I wanted to put up, this one tweet, which I thought was actually, I don't know, maybe I find it a little bit. I find humor and stuff that people go like, dude, that's not funny. I'm like, I don't care. I'm like, but I think it's funny, And
that ASM, great interview. There you go. It's awesome. Great job. Missed this one. Could have asked if he holds any crypto, but he had some very clear feedback on how the regulatory framework for cryptocurrency should look and safeguarding individual privacy and liberties. That to me, that tells you the kind of person that he is. He's passionate, cares about this country, cares about the people in this country, cares about making sure that we adhere to our constitutional standard and not just go off the rail like many others out there that have let the country kind of go off the rail. And to see some these representatives displaced over the next 10 years, obviously we hope it happens a lot faster, but it seems like there are some major issues in terms of how the representatives are led to a vote. Kind of already, knew some of that. It's good when you hear representatives actually vocalizing that it's typically the staffers that are collecting. It's the staffers communicating with each other, and it's the staffers presenting, okay, we did the research, here's how you're going to vote. That's a really scary thought.
Yeah, they're not
When
really,
you,
they're not
these
representing the people.
not representing the people, they're not decisive on their decision based on their own understanding of it. They're allowing, again, unelected individuals to make decisions that are impacting this country. It's very, very dangerous.
This is the tweet that I was looking for that I found some humor in, because the Democrats tweeted this out where it says, Democratic women governors get the job done, and they're all smiling, laughing it up. And Byron Donald said he weighed in on it, and he said, open borders, sanctuary cities, COVID, school closures, vaccine mandates, shuttered businesses during COVID, skyrocketing crime, rampant homelessness, high taxes, overregulation. The job they're doing isn't good. Hashtag vote them out.
Where was that? Would have been a great one to put up. That would have been
that was said, but there's so much stuff that threw in the heap. I mean, you can't get to it all, Jeff. But I want to throw that one up. It's like, that just made me laugh. It's like, but if you should all be following him on Twitter. Great for him to come in here. It was weird because we had to reschedule, because I think the last time there was a vote going on in Congress, so obviously he couldn't make it. And then this was the rescheduled date, which is a national holiday here in the States. So for Labor Day, it's the one day off if you're a working person. If you're a working man or woman, you get this day off. It's like you get Christmas, you get New Year's, and you get Labor Day and Thanksgiving. And there you are. There's your holiday, because you're a worker and we love you.
Good stuff, man.
Yeah,
He would also make a great speaker.
There was also a question in there, and then after we had him, I wanted to press him like, hey, is Kevin McCarthy a good speaker? Because I was like, you don't want to press somebody, especially somebody. I don't want him.
That's a tough question.
Putting him in a really horrible position. So I was like, I'm going to shy away from that one. Like, I would have been like, Newt Gingrich was a great speaker, okay? Because he tweeted out this interview of Newt on his X post, one of the X posts, talked about that.
Yeah.
And I was going to say, do we have a good speaker? But I was like, I couldn't figure out a way to phrase it that wouldn't have put him in a hot seat. And
I saw that one in there, and it's interesting too to do a comparative between McCarthy and Newt Gingrich. Newt Gingrich was super dynamic as a speaker during his period of time, and was able to, push through the Contract for America and communicate with then President Clinton, which actually, was able to turn the economy around. And we saw some relatively good outcome as a result. Also, some other things that happened during that administration, kind of like NAFTA and others, but because of Newt. And that's a really good point, and that's where you take someone like Byron Donalds and have him serve as speaker. He understands the economic side. Most of these, and this is also would have been an interesting question, how is his background allow him to understand, especially the economics, more so than the rest of these representatives that are all lawyers. They went to school and studied law. He went and studied business, and he has a background in business and finance. And obviously, he should have, a lot more and more succinct understanding and clear understanding of our economics.
Look, Mark Smithson says he has the same background, commercial banking loan officer, PNC Insurance. I need to get into politics. Can I count on your vote? This is great.
You need to. Are you in Florida? You are, right? Are you in the free state of Florida? Let's get it going. We need to.
He says, hey, great for you guys. Great interview. Thank you very much.
That.
I love the fact that he was very open to this one here. Legendary. Thank you. Please come back. It really is a good thing to.
There's.
Solid
That's
point.
a good point. Good point. And he is horrible.
That's the point. It's like Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan Chase. I mean, it's this revolving door. One of the things I love that he said, Jeff, just in reflecting, is when he said that, when he talked about how Congress Like you don't go in there and sort of, it's they're just they have all these like this long sort of way of doing things. You don't want to upset them. You can't audit the Fed because it'd be like going in there like moving their beer. I thought that was a pretty good analogy too. And when he talked about you know, people in most of the people in Congress still print their boarding passes. They don't know. It always kills me like this stuff. Like I see that all the time. People are pulling out paper boarding pass, and I'm like, dude, what are you doing? You know why? It's like the only one that I've seen that really like if you're flying Southwest, like Southwest, everybody has it on their phone. It seems it's just like you know they've just drummed it into you. But I mean, people going in there and I printing out the boarding pass and yeah, that's Congress.
I'll print it out if I think my phone battery's dying.
Yeah, that could be. Fortunately, if you carry an iPhone, you don't have that problem. So we don't ever worry about that on the iPhone side of the house. At some point, I could see you transition to iPhone and saying the same thing my brother said, which is like, why didn't I just start out this way? I'm like, I don't know. Works great with PCs, works great with Macs, but
yeah,
you can hold out if you want. But
hey, send Gary an interview invite and see what they say. That's a great idea. I'm sure he'll come right on.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, it's like, hey, we just you know, it was funny because when we had Warren Davidson on here, Warren Davidson was like, "Oh no, they don't." He goes, "They don't dislike her. They want to kill it. They want to destroy it." Like it was like, "Whoa, what?"
Yeah.
And he goes, and then he also said, "There's people on the same side of the aisle who talk the same way the Democrats do." And I'm like, "Wait, what?" You know, that was like another telling sort of an interview when you say, "Whoa, wait, what's this?" And this is what I love when you don't have like when we get to ask them questions and get a really nice, transparent answer, but we kind of learn something. He was talking about how they jockey for position and they compete for these things behind the scenes. I just feel like they're just like chopping each other off at the knees and trying to, you know what happens. Like he even said, like, "Hey, before I went to Congress, I didn't think this. After going to Congress and being there, okay, so my thoughts have changed." And
I'm sure. I'm sure there's really and I was thinking about this earlier about as an elected official, what does it take for them to stay there where they're continuously fighting? Not they're fighting to get the right chairs and committees and all of that, but then they still have to come home and they have to campaign. So they're constantly in that mode. It's got to do something to your psyche at some point where you're always on. You're always in this moment where you're asking people for stuff and you're constantly fighting for your position. And it's got to be it's got to be tough. It can't, and then you have to maintain your sanity and make sure that you're coming back to support and represent the people. So I put them there it was supposed to be a part-time gig, Congress. They weren't supposed to be there full time, and they're supposed to come back go work on their farm or whatever. Ask Jeeves.
It's some future Jeeves for directions. Oh no, please don't do that. Oh no, please don't do that. But I guess that's what that's what you have there. It was a great time. It was a special night. Thank you all for joining. I really appreciate it. We're gonna get out of here a little bit early.
Look at that point there on the way out. Only a matter of time, folks. Is from Chris Rodriguez. Only a matter of time, folks. They are making the United States the last piece of the equation while Ripple gets every big player outside of the U.S.
There you go.
Interesting, too. Very interesting. So, did we ask him when moon? We did not ask him when moon. But
we didn't ask when moon. Willie goes, "Hey, it's funny to me that Gary Gensler is here to protect us, yet avoids the people he swore to protect." Another good point, right? But I just see like, hey, you want to get the guy out. All you have to do is sounds to me like when he was under oath and he may have lied, and it was like somebody I know Weezy out there tweeted out some testimony from some other folks who basically fingered Gary as the guy, the one that's at the top who wrote all the checks. So I would love to see this. I'd like to see some FOIA requests. Let's get our hands on that. Also, the Alpha Bank hoax, and people don't talk about that. That was the very initial first one, and that one cost money. We know who wrote a check for that. 2 strikes and you're out. And the funny thing is Rep Donalds was the one that basically set the ball rolling, and he almost swallowed his tongue. Gensler did when he got asked that question, and he pressed him. He's like, "You're under oath. what is it? You're on the road. That I was like, I love that we led with that. It was funny as we were playing that, I could see Rep Donald's laughing.
Oh
Because
yeah,
he was destroying him. It was awesome.
it was
It was
great.
fantastic. So,
It was great.
but anyway, that's all we got, Jeff. And you want to say anything before we get up?
The best and the brightest in all of crypto space here. Join, follow, do all those great things. Go check out onthechain.io if you guys want to support us. You can go over there, plug in your email. We send out an email after every show. You get links to our talking points. You get a direct link to the video, direct link to the podcast. You want to support, you can do. There's all sorts of great ways to support us, but you can go check out the Badass Yeti coffee. That's awesome stuff. People are loving that. Check out the Badass Yetis. There's links down below in the description, for that. All sorts of great ways that you can support us. Tell your friends to come and check us out. Come and show up to every show. We stream 3 nights a week. There's a special night tonight for the Congressman, but Sunday, Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Saturday mornings, 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we'll be back with you guys on Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And that's all we got. DNI t-shirts had bad moon dates.
Alchemist is saying DNI t-shirts with bad moon dates, 75% off. So just saying, that's some funny stuff right there. Boy, oh boy. Yeah, I mean, there's so much stuff that we could have gotten to talk about, but thank you for that. I really appreciate that. Really love the interview. Don't forget to send interview requests. We want to see the excuse from Gary.
Oh, for Gary. Yeah.
We were told that Hester Purse, she won't talk to us because we talk about XRP. That was during when the case was going on, but then Tony talks about it nonstop too, and he's had her on like 7 or 8 times. So it's just a matter of time. We'll have her on here. I'm sure he's the only sane voice over there. So
Good Gary.
there you are, and that's all we have, guys. Have a great one. We'll see you in 2 nights.
See you in 2 nights.
See you guys on the next one. Chip and Jeff and Rep Byron Donaldson. Byron Donalds. Why do I say Byron Donalds? Out.
Are you down with OTC? Please like, subscribe, and click the bell to be notified when the next video drops.